Good morning and welcome to the October 12th, 2020 Board of County Commissioners Board work session. We're continuing on with budget presentations, and this morning for a couple hours we have Public Works and well, a whole host of things for this afternoon as well. This afternoon. So by way of introduction, I'm John Hutchings, the chair of the board. Also present is Vice Chair Commissioner Ty Menser, County Manager Ramiro Chavez, and I don't see Robin. No, it's Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. And we've got Jennifer Walker, the Director of Public Works, and we have Karen Weiss and Lucy Mills, Scott Lindblom, Tim Wilson, Olivia Outman, and Patty Rossetto. Have I missed anybody?
No, I think you got it covered. Commissioner Edwards may be running a couple minutes late.
Okay, so we're off and running.
So good morning, Commissioner. Welcome to week 2 of budget presentations. Last week, you heard from General Government and Law and Justice, and you covered just about all, if not all, of the general fund offices and departments. This week, you'll hear from departments that mainly run on restricted funds. So we'll start the morning with Public Works and then continue from there. What you'll find is these departments cover a very broad range of services. So Public Works, Public Health, and CPED all have 2 hours. Oh, thank you. 2 hours with a break built in. So whenever you're ready, take a break, but we're going to turn it over to Jennifer, and Jennifer, welcome you and your team to the budget room.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, commissioners, for this opportunity to present our budget. I am going to share my screen now. Okay. So as Robin mentioned, we have mostly, well, all restricted funds and have a little bit of interaction with the general fund. And following, I'm Jennifer Walker, Public Works Director. I do have with me my leadership team, Karen Weiss, who is the financial and asset manager, Scott Lindblom, our county engineer, Lucy Mills, who is our road operations manager, Tim Wilson, who is the storm and surface water manager. So following the nice format that we were provided by the budget office, thank you very much. A little bit about Public Works and how we serve our community. We are a 24/7 operation responsible for the planning, programming, construction, maintenance, and operations of the county-owned infrastructure. We manage about 80% of the county's capital projects. We're responsible for managing the county's transportation system, maintaining our county roads, bridges, traffic signs, and streetlights. This includes planning and constructing for new road infrastructure and improving existing roads. Through our development review team, which is the permitting arm of Public Works, we review and inspect nearly every permit issued by the county, working with developers and property owners to ensure compliance and that the infrastructure that we will be adopting is built to last. We provide water and sewer services to approximately 950 utility customers and manage 3 water utilities, 4 sewer utilities, and 3 wastewater treatment plants. We're responsible for the Stormwater Capital Facilities Program, our stormwater operations and maintenance, and development and implementation of the county's drainage design and erosion control manual. If you've ever taken trash to the transfer station in Lacey, you've interacted with Public Works because we manage the solid waste transfer station and the closed landfill in Hawks Prairie, as well as the 2 drop box sites in Rochester and Rainier. We also take care of county parks and trails and manage the county's noxious weed program and provide administrative services for 2 lake management districts. Public Works also partners with the Sheriff's Office, Corrections Division, and the DUI Drug Court to provide community litter pickup services by inmates and court sanctions. We have quite a bit of responsibility. Okay, so moving into our 2021 budget that we've proposed, we have just under $102 million with a staffing level of 200 FTEs. Our personnel costs range from 22 to 25% of our total budget. The other expenditure figures cover, so this figure here covers everything else. So our cost of materials for maintenance, equipment costs, internal service costs, and capital construction costs. Approximately 75% of our budget is operations, and the other 25% is capital. You'll also notice here that the actual expenditures in 2019 for our 200 FTEs was a little over 19 million. And what we budgeted in 2020 and 2021, while we haven't changed, we had added one FTE, you'll see about a $3 million difference from what we budgeted to actual. And that is as a result of vacant positions that we have. So we are realizing some savings there. However, it wasn't our intent to realize those savings. So we have 23 separate funds within the department. So as you think about all of the things that Public Works is responsible for, there are corresponding funds associated with these programs and services. And we've provided a summary of those 23 funds showing the estimated beginning balance for 2021, the proposed revenues, proposed expenditures, and then the ending fund balance. We will be going through the 10-year financials later on in the presentation, not at this point. But as we look through these various funds, you'll notice that the proposed revenues in most cases are exceeding you'll notice that the proposed expenditures are exceeding the proposed revenues. And in some cases, this is deliberate as we're spending down fund balances like the solid waste funds and park impact fee funds. But others are a result of expenditures outpacing revenues like our roads and transportation fund or our water and sewer utilities. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, our interaction with the general fund is primarily one of making deposits and not withdrawals. We do have one request of the general fund this year of $60,000, and we'll outline that. But for the most part, through the levy shift diversion and internal service costs, we anticipate paying in about $15.7 million into the general fund. Are there any specific questions on these before I move right into the policy level requests?
Gary or Ty?
No, sir.
No? Okay.
So a few challenges that we've identified. The first being that managing increasing costs to maintain, preserve, and replacing our infrastructure. So Public Works is responsible for some of the county's largest financially valued physical infrastructure assets. We have aging infrastructure and a higher demand on that infrastructure as our population is increasing. The revenue we are receiving isn't keeping pace with the higher maintenance and replacement costs, and we just have less buying power. We're also challenged with maintaining adequate staffing levels to provide essential services. So remember earlier I mentioned the $3 million unspent in budgeted personnel costs as a result of vacant positions. And so just to kind of make that a little bit more tangible, for example, we have our Stormwater Technical Services Group, which is a 4-person work unit, and we have one individual at this point that's in that work unit. And that's for a variety of reasons. We had an individual retire. We had another individual that, as a result of COVID-19 and the schools not being open, they're choosing to stay home and help with that remote learning. And then we had another individual that moved on to a private firm. In the 3 years that I have been with the county, we haven't had a fully staffed design engineering group. Our engineering positions continue to be difficult to fill. And we're averaging a weekly 30% reduction in staffing levels in our Rhodes division. With the COVID-19, we haven't been able to staff our litter program. And of course, this is problematic because, as we know, if the trash gets dumped, it is like a magnet and additional trash gets dumped there. So we are really working hard to try to keep that cleaned up. We also have long tenured staff, and this is fantastic because they have experience and can perform their work quite efficiently. But it also means that we have more leave throughout the year, and this is leave that's deserved, that's been earned, but it also means that there's less labor hours that are available to do the same amount of work, or in some cases, more work as the county is growing and our inventory of assets is increasing. And those assets do have a higher demand on them as our population is growing. But all of these are leading to all these shortages result in decreased services to our community. And the last challenge I've outlined is maintaining adequate facility functionality for our day-to-day operations during emergency events. And this is both a safety and a capacity issue. So I found out during our last snow event that when the power went out, the HVAC system is not connected to the backup generator. So we had staff who are responsible for dispatching and managing the operations during this 24-hour operations during the snow event that were having to go into their vehicles to warm up because the building did not have heat. We also had staff that were using their flashlight on their phones to do the vehicle inspections before they went out because of inadequate lighting around the facility. And I think that as a first responder agency, it's critical that we have the adequate facility to be able to respond to emergency events. And you'll hear more about these challenges as we discuss our policy level requests, because there is a direct connection to those. Okay. So the first set that we have highlighted here, these are revenue policy level requests. So in the first item, B34026, Parks and Trails Conservation Futures Funding Increase. This is to adjust for the 25% cap that we can spend on M&O, and this is for, we're able to use Conservation Futures funding for M&O for Kennydale and Deschutes Falls. The second request is for actually the Long Lake and Lake Lawrence. These are assessments for future lake management treatment projects and requests that the lake management districts have placed. The Long Lake Management District 3% assessment increase. This is to their annual operating assessment for maintenance activities. For our operating transfer requests, the first one for solid waste transfer adjustments, this is making adjustments to our operating transfers between maintenance and operations, the post-closure, and reserve and operations reserve funds. So we had been funding capital projects out of the M&O fund, and we're making adjustment and transferring and funding our capital projects out of our reserve fund, which is a better practice. And so this dollar amount, what you're seeing is those different transfers amongst the three different solid waste funds. Karen, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you've got it. I think that just having fewer transfers is also just from a budgetary standpoint. Robin probably can nod her head at this. A good outcome, not to have so many transfers back and forth, because that both inflates the revenue and the expenses.
Thank you.
But Jennifer, as you're
Yes.
going level request proposal by proposal, just slow down just a bit, because I'm going page by page and just skip over different pages. I want to get to them so I can pay attention.
Absolutely. My apologies. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I don't need to apologize.
Okay. So the policy level request B34-129.
Yep.
This is the water and sewer utility operating transfer adjustments. So this is where we're setting aside rate revenue in the reserve fund to finance major maintenance and repair projects and capital infrastructure needs. So even though these levels aren't adequate to cover our future infrastructure needs, we're still putting through those rates a percentage aside for future improvements.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So now we're moving on to our cross-divisional policy level requests. So one of the advantages of Public Works is we do have an opportunity to share across the funds and benefit with shared resources. And the first item you see here is a request to reclassify an existing vacant position to a Public Works asset manager position. And this is continuing our investment in a comprehensive asset management program. What we have also identified as a challenge with our aging infrastructure and aligns with the county's strategic plan and initiative number 8, which is to support robust and well-maintained infrastructure systems for a thriving community. And so what this position will do is assist with the development of the comprehensive asset management program. So we already have our different systems at varying places with asset management. And so I would say probably the most advanced system that we have is our our storm and surface water system, where they are making data-driven decisions because they've collected the data, they've done a full inventory of all of the assets and condition assessment, and are then planning out those longer term investments that need to be made to maintain our existing infrastructure. But we need to do that for our other systems. And this individual would be responsible for working with those program managers to set up that longer term comprehensive plan. We see the benefits of an asset management program as improved financial performance, informed asset investment decisions, managed risk, and then improved services and outputs. And what this will do is help us make data-driven decisions, optimize our resources that we do have, and show through data that we're being good stewards of public resources. Any specific questions on that policy level request?
Yeah, go ahead, Ty.
The cost identified, $75,000, is that the amount above the current classification of the existing position? That's the additional expense?
It is. It is both in the position and then also for some additional equipment for our field staff to assist with the data collection. So what we're trying to do is move from doing everything in paper and then coming in to the office and then having that downloaded or uploaded into the system. We'd like to be able to do right when they're out there, collecting that information and having it electronically just uploaded. So it is, let me find it here. The cost of the impact for the reclassification, it looks like, is $15,000 to $20,000. And the additional items, it looks like $10,000 for the field technology, and then $50,000 for professional consulting services. That makes up the $75,294.
Anything, Gary?
No, sir.
Okay.
The Amanda permitting system replacement, this is a combined effort that Public Works is contributing to the replacement of the county's existing permitting system. And this is Public Works' portion. So we have, this is split up amongst our development review, our utilities, and there's another one, Karen, who's the other?
It was stormwater.
Stormwater, thank you. So this is what Public Works is contributing to that replacement system. Okay.
Jennifer, as you go through these, could you mention which fund is paying for each of these items? Like, which of your funds would pay for the asset manager?
Most of them. That's why we have, this is the one that's the cross-divisional. So the next slide, we're going to go fund by fund, but these two were pulled out because they are going across several funds.
Thank you.
Yes.
I can provide, I don't know if it's helpful, but we do have a split on the asset manager. 45% would be roads, 30% solid waste, 15% stormwater, and 10% utilities.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. So moving on to this is for the roads fund. These are the policy level requests that we have out of the roads fund. So requesting expenditure authority. The first item that we've identified as our number one priority is the Tilley campus improvements and master planning for long-term needs. And I had identified in the challenges the need that we have. So this is requesting expenditure authority to look at addressing some of those immediate safety concerns that we have, and then the longer range planning for our operations. Obviously, anything that we're doing out here with the facility is in coordination with facilities management in central services. But this is the funding piece to do that planning effort. The second item is for a right-of-way agent to support our property management program. So we have, in an initial assessment, Public Works is responsible for 325 parcels totaling 3,300 acres. And I am proposing that we set up a new property management program to actively manage the property that we have, to go through and identify whether we have it and it's integral to our operations, like our bullpens, or whether we're holding that property for future development for our different systems, or if it's property that we need to surplus and sell. And that is what this position would be responsible for doing. We had, this effort had been started, and this is continuing on. We did have someone that was from facilities management that had started this effort.
I have a question on that, if I may.
Yes.
Is it your request for this position to manage only Public Works properties under the custody of Public Works? Because the conversation at some point we had is that there is a need for a property management across the county.
So my thought was that we would set the framework up for Public Works, and we would be able to then take that same framework and make it broader for all of the county. But we could just as easily go the other way. I think my thought was right now with the financial state of the general fund that we might be able to get this started in Public Works and then be able to take what we've set up and make it broader.
So I'm going to jump in here too, because part of the result of that conversation was the lean process that our project managers jointly participated in, where one of the results of the thinking during the lean was that while an asset is an asset, there are unique things going on in Public Works compared to central services. And the nexus of having an asset manager that's extremely familiar with both the type of asset that each of our departments is working on and what it takes to manage those assets, having that embedded in each department is important. So as we go forward, if we talk about combining that, I think that we need to have more conversations about how to make it work. But so I support this request from Public Works. You know, when I'm wearing my central services hat, I think that at least to start, both Jennifer and I need someone who specializes in the different types of assets that we each manage.
Okay, unless there's other questions, I'll move on to the next item. This is our a request for extra help for staffing funding. So for staff funding, we have 2 project positions in road operations that are ending at the end of 2020. And so the net increase for this request is actually $40,000 annually. And this approach will allow us to hire up to 16 seasonal staff flagger laborers and will better align with staffing levels with seasonal maintenance needs and provide training opportunities for employees who are interested in moving into full-time road operation positions. So we typically within road operations bring in about 8 seasonals a year, and this would be increasing it, give us the opportunity to increase it to 16 and be able to address those peaks when we have our during those spring and summer months. I also think that these 2 positions, so the right-of-way agent and the road operations, the extra staffing, both help us with our succession planning as well. Within the right-of-way group, it's a 4 staff and a working manager. 3 of those individuals will be eligible for retirement within the next year or 2. And bringing in someone to learn the system, I think will be quite advantageous. The last policy level request here is B34025. And that is a coordinated effort with CPED. A recent state audit recommended a rate study to provide information on establishing rates for both external and internal customers to the Building Development Center. And this would be the Rhodes portion of that rate, of that cost of service study. So those are the policy level requests that we have for the road fund.
Jennifer, the what you just talked about, is any of that a cost sharing with CPED at all?
Yes, CPED will have their cost as well. This is just the road funds portion.
Okay.
I'm looking. Let me see if we have it actually written in here. I don't know what the overall cost would be, but I know that CPED will have, Community Planning and Economic Development will have their portion, and Public Health and Social Services will also be contributing to that cost of service study as well.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay. Tyre, Gary, any questions?
No, but I I do have one, I guess, of Karen. When on the extra help, by increasing that number, does that seem to give you a benefit when it comes to hiring? You've had an opportunity to observe folks, and sometimes they transfer from extra help to full-time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That would be actually our ideal approach, is that whoever we hire full-time will have been a seasonal employee, so we have some experience with them.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question on the number 4.
Yes.
I wasn't just I'm not tracking what it cost of services. Can you explain a little more what this study is about?
Yes. So for the Building Development Center, we are looking at, we bill out, so we have certain fees that are charged for activities that are done. And that is based off of what it costs us to do those activities. So this is a study that's looking and evaluating what is it actually costing us, and are our fees that we have established appropriate to cover those costs.
Did I hear you say that this is like public health is involved in CPED? So what kind of fees are we talking about?
When individuals come in and submit for building permits, any interaction that the activities where they're coming to the Building Development Center and requesting the development of a plat, a building permit, they're putting up a single family residence home, any of those activities that they're coming to the Building Development Center for. Because I think it's a full cost recovery.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to our Parks and Trails Fund. The first request for expenditure authority is to cover the anticipated increase in assessment from the Black Lake Special District. The cost there will be increasing for Kennedale and Guerin Park. We're anticipating $10,800. The second item is for grounds maintenance staff, and an increase we're looking at possibly beginning that in July. The department has certainly had several briefings with the board regarding the lack of resources to adequately maintain the county's parks and trails. We do have 7 active parks and 47 miles of trail, all maintained by 4 FTEs 7 days a week. And so this is a request. It's my understanding that there's the possibility that there's legislation that may allow some of the fees that we can just use for capital, potentially for maintenance and operations. And this would give us an opportunity to take advantage of that if that legislation actually goes through.
Jennifer, what would the annual, if this cost is for 6 months, what would the annual cost be? Double this?
Yes, correct.
And how would this be paid?
Through our existing budget. But go ahead, Karen, if you want to.
Oh, you're exactly right. Right now, it's slated to be paid for out of our Parks and Trails Fund with the $500,000 general fund from our levy shift. My understanding of this is this was something that was discussed at a board level a few months ago, and we were given some direction to include another position in our budget. So Robin, I see you shaking your head. Does that ring some bells for you? We received some.
Right. I'm not surprised to see it. I'm just curious how it would be paid for, because currently the fund is using all of the revenue transferred in from the general fund just to maintain the fund balance.
Sure. So we will be showing the Parks and Trails 10-year financial plan at the end of our policy levels, for operating policy levels, so you can take a look at that. Right now, that is a part of the ongoing annual expenditures that would be paid for from that fund.
And we will not be moving forward with filling this position if that legislation doesn't come through and we aren't able to use I think is it park impact fees, or that we're not able to use other fees to fund this. So if that legislation doesn't come through, we will not be moving forward with filling this position.
So this is legislation that the county is proposing to the legislature.
Correct.
Not something that the legislature has sponsored in the past and put forward.
So related to the proposed legislation, the county introduced a concept last year. They allow us to use some of the traffic impact fees for operations. That didn't go anywhere last year, and in the sponsor to that idea is moving on. So I don't know really the practicality of introducing a new piece of legislation next year. And in fact, I don't think it was any appetite because there was a lot of controversy behind that. So if this is predicated on new legislation, you may consider having a plan B.
Absolutely. I would say that the only reason you're seeing this is because we got guidance to put this in here. So we can just as easily not have it there.
I guess that I'm not, because I think that we all agree that there's a significant need for more staffing in parks. So I don't think I'm suggesting taking it out. What I'm suggesting is, Romero said, is, how can we find a way to pay for this, and what options does the board really have? So one of their options is increasing the transfer from the general fund.
Sure. I would say that would not have been something that I would have submitted for, but yes.
Right. Understandable.
Okay. The third item here is policy level request B34024. And this is Parks and Trails fee in lieu of open space funding. So under Thurston County Code 21.60.140, concerning planned residential development design standards, it allows for a citizen or developer to provide a monetary payment in lieu of providing the amount of open space required by the permitting process for a proposed development. And so this funding is needed to allow for the creation of that fee in lieu program, because we do not have one established in response to the developer request to utilize the code provision for parks open space. And so we need to actually have that set up. We do have a request to be able to do this. Certainly our strategy all along, because of the limited resources we have for maintenance and operations, it has not been to add new facilities and new parks and open space. It has been to try to add capacity to our existing facilities. And so as we look at establishing this program, we'll need to look at how, if we do this, how we would be able to fund the maintenance and operations of it. And I don't know if in that payment that the developer would provide, the initial feedback that we're getting from legal is that it wouldn't be able to be used for maintenance and operations. But we do want to explore that a little bit more as we look at establishing, because the code identifies it, establishing this program.
I have a question, Jennifer, and this is being live streamed, so a lot of the public may not understand what this means. So I want you to spell it out for us. That if a developer comes in and they want to put in 100, 500, 700 homes or some type of development, code mandates they have set aside open space for park currently?
That is correct. There's some, I'm assuming that there's some formula that's calculated as to how much open space they will need to set aside. Probably in part because of some stormwater needs. I would think that would be a component of it. And then also just what was established for within the code as to, you know, what that community wanted for those developments, kind of that, what do they want the feel of that community to be?
Or the community or the developer. So this would be what's being proposed, and it's being proposed by a developer?
They are asking to to be able to use the fee in lieu program that is identified in our Thurston County Code, but we have not yet established a fee in lieu program.
Right. So a developer or developers are proposing, we don't want to have open space as a requirement by code currently. We just want to give you extra money. And if we don't have to have open space, we can make more money on that open space by building on it. Is that true?
I don't know that I can specifically speak to that. What I can say is that they are asking to be able to take advantage of this fee in lieu program.
So it's a balance of open space or stormwater needs, whatever the purpose is of open space versus money.
In essence, if I may, in essence, that's on point, Commissioner. And as Jennifer stated, in the code allows for the open space, the parks and trails fee in lieu of an open space. But in essence, that's what it does is a developer who is required to set aside open space for as a result of their development. That open space serves the residents who may be, living in that particular development. This particular part of the code, which have to be honest with you, we just discovered this in the last few months, they allows for this fee. We don't have a framework as to how we can implement pieces of the code.
Yeah.
And this will give us the perspective. From my point of view, and this is just, first reaction, I'll be curious to see if there's a study how much liability it kind of will absorb. Because a developer can come, exercise this particular fee in lieu of open space, and what obligation the county will have to provide the open space for the residents who may be for the residents who will be purchasing a property on those developments. So that is probably my biggest concern at this point. And again, without seeing the results of this particular study, but it's worth going through this process just to determine the means and methods and what liability the county will have if in fact we absorb the needs of reserving open space for future development.
And I also heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, I also had heard that in lieu of space within the development, the developer of a residential or commercial enterprise could purchase land or open space outside of that property or that development, but the county would have to maintain it?
That is a possibility. I think it depends on how we establish the program.
Okay,
But yes.
okay. Ty or Gary?
No, sir. Makes sense to me.
Go ahead, Ty.
So the $60,000 here is exploration of this concept of setting it up. It's not setting it up. What exactly is the scope of this ask of $60,000?
It is to develop the program. It is to consult, have a consultant develop the fee in lieu program for the county.
Is the code prescriptive about what the fee, how much the fees are, or is that something the consultant develops in terms of trying to make sure it's equivalent to what the open space would be? I understand there's the wrinkle of the M&O and everything, but I mean, is it set out so that it's supposed to be roughly equivalent to what the alternative requirement would be if they developed with the open space embedded in the project?
I think that'll be a part of what we develop in the program, how that's done. What are examples of how other agencies have put their program together, but on the surface, yes, it seems like there should be an equivalent there.
But that's not like laid out in our code at this point.
It is not, no.
It just allows us to do something like this and work out the details, which is what you're proposing.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Good, thank you. We can move on.
Okay. So moving on to the Long Lake Fund. This is the Long Lake Management District. This is a policy level request B34021. The Lake Management District is recommending an increase in professional services for management of nuisance weed populations.
Nuisance what?
Nuisance weeds.
Oh, weeds. I thought you said bees.
Weeds. Policy request B34039. This is the Rhodes Construction Fund 3010. This is a request, is a continuation of the improvements to the county's project delivery process, and basically allows us the permission to plan. And so this is where we are, as opposed to moving forward at a high level and saying, here's the total cost of a capital project, we're actually doing an alternative analysis and study to say, here's the problem that we need to solve, what are our options of solving it, and then identifying the one and establishing a cost estimate for that. That is more, a little bit more reliable, and falls in again with the improvements that the process improvement team that Robin and I sponsored worked on. Was that last year or this? I think last year.
At the end of last year.
Yes, to to better manage expectations when we put figures out there for our projects. Okay. Solid
Where's
waste.
this,
Oh.
Sorry, you said the slide says $410,000 of grant funding. And where's that coming from?
Karen, do you want to respond to that?
It is, I believe it is federal money. We have 150,000 programmed in for the Grand Mount Trail feasibility study and 300,000 programmed in for the rural mobility study. That adds up to more than 410 because one of those studies carries on into 2022.
Is that it, Ty?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the solid waste funds. The first priority policy level request is to account for the anticipated increases in contractual expenses for our transfer station operations and disposal and transportation, as well as our organics contracts. As you know, we did extend those contracts this year, and there were increases in those, in the costs that we're paying for those. The second item, B34044, this is a request to fund the completion of the pre-design at the work for future improvements. So we'll analyze the feasibility of improvement options and the estimated cost for those. The third request is the Solid Waste Division rate study. This was a recommendation out of the Solid Waste Management Plan, and this request will fund the rate study to ensure our rates are adequately covering our system costs. And the last item here is a request actually from Community Planning and Economic Development. And this is to cover the cost of living and personnel benefit increases for the WSU Master Gardener position that's funded out of solid waste. I'm going to move on to the storm and surface water. So the first item is a request to fund the development of a comprehensive plan for the storm and surface water utility. And the purpose of the plan is to guide Thurston County storm and surface water utility programs in a manner that's consistent with applicable local, state, and federal regulations, while charging ratepayers at an equitable utility rate. This will be the first that will be done for the utility. The second item is a request for expenditure of $20,000. This is as a result of new regulation that we're required to prepare an annual plan and document how the Washington State Department of Transportation stormwater utility fees are being spent on stormwater utility projects. It will fund the alternative analysis and preliminary designs. So we collect about $270,000 annually in WSDOT stormwater fees, and we're anticipating that this $20,000 will be paid from that. The third request is the drainage studies and alternative design funding. These studies will focus on flooding or poor quality issues on a larger scale and will feed into the capital improvement program. And the last request for expenditure for the Drainage Design and Erosion Control Manual update. The Department of Ecology is currently revising their manual, and the county will need to revise and adopt a new manual to remain compliant with state requirements. Any questions on that before I move to water and sewer utilities?
For me,
Okay.
nope, don't see any other hands.
Okay. So moving on to water and sewer utility funds. The first item is to fund, this is funding that's a request across all of the utilities. And it's to cover required overtime, holiday pay, and on-call expenses. So our current maintenance level budget isn't sufficient, and we need to keep our water and sewer utilities functioning and maintain essential services to customers, which does require staff to respond outside of scheduled business hours, resulting in additional payroll. So this is really just right sizing that fund and the expenditures for that item. The second request is funding expenditure authority of $65,000, and this is to evaluate this is for cost of services and to evaluate the feasibility of a consolidation. This is for the cost of services study to analyze our current rate structure and develop a proposed rate structure and rates, and consider the feasibility of a consolidation of our utilities and whether that's financial from the financial perspective. It will provide data to consider in the decision on whether to move forward with the utility consolidation. So we'd come to the board, and the first step we looked at was could we legally do a consolidation? And we had a briefing with the board, and now we're looking at what are the cost of services. So it's not just certainly, it's not just the cost of services for the consolidation, but also, as you've seen in some of our other requests that we've had, it's a best practice to look at the cost of service for our utilities to make sure that the rates are adequately covering those costs. And that's what this request is for.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Commissioner Messer had her hand up.
Oh,
You see that?
the board received a letter from Boston Harbor, and I'm sure you're aware of that. And they wanted to have a discussion with the board, and I believe Ramiro communicated back that we would do that. And I'm just wondering if, maybe this is a question for Ramiro, but is that a discussion that we can have before the board votes on this item?
Yes,
That's not what the timing of all this is.
Yeah, absolutely, Commissioner. And in fact, members of the Boston Harbor community are currently watching this conversation. And as you stated in the letter, the board sent, as a result of the feedback the Commissioner's office received on this. If the board agrees on this study, that doesn't mean that you will agree on the consolidation. This is just a study to see what the feasibility of the consolidation will be. As I stated on the letter, as you may recall, it was really just looking for alternatives as to how we can probably streamline the process of managing all the utilities the county has across the county. And I just want to make sure that is the case, because I know some of the members of the Boston Harbor water and sewer utilities are currently watching. And again, this is not a commitment by the board if you choose to fund this study to consolidate the utilities. In the letter, we asked them if they want to have a conversation with the board. They can certainly reach out, and we can set up a briefing for them to provide you with their perspective. And also today, just by listening to this proposal, the board is not agreeing on the study either. Your budget deliberations will come in the middle of November, is when you start having determine what requests you like to move forward as part of the 2021 budget.
Thank you for that framework. Anything else? All right, press on, Jennifer.
Okay. So the third request is funding to evaluate and potentially purchase an upgraded utility software. So our current software was purchased 10 years ago and hasn't kept up with our growing utility needs. And so we need a more sophisticated software to better address the financial operations. And this is that initial investment in looking into those options. Again, this is a coordination with the IT department. This is the request for the funding piece of it. The last item is for a Boston Harbor reallocation of step tank repairs and pumping from reserves to M&O. So we're adjusting the cost of our step tank repairs and the fund the activities are being paid out of. So as a result of really successfully addressing our backlog of repair and maintenance activities on the step tanks and being able to schedule annual preventative maintenance, which is more predictable and consistent, we're making an adjustment. We no longer moving that into M&O as opposed to reserve and having them be more of a major project. These activities are really just M&O. So we're adjusting for that accordingly.
I have a question.
Certainly.
So on your statement of need, on that sheet, it shows $40,000. And in here, it shows 15. I'm just curious about that.
Yes.
So the total original cost of the step tank repairs and pumping was $40,000, and that was budgeted out of the reserve fund, $4210. As Jennifer mentioned, that was sort of a reflective of a lot of backlog and upkeep major maintenance that we needed to do. Now what we're suggesting is that we reduce that $40,000 out of the reserve fund and budget the needed funds over in our M&O fund, which is $4,200. And so we are only asking for $25,000 to be moved over there. So it's actually a $15,000 net decrease. So we're taking it from $40,000. The new number in the M&O fund will be $25,000.
And does that solve the problem out there?
Well, I think you will see our infrastructure problem is not solved. The pumping and repairs of the step tanks, as reflected by the cost that it needs to maintain those here, is solved by this transfer or this decrease.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I don't know if this question is for Robin or for Jennifer. Did you say there's a natural built-in break? Is it after the summary of policy level requests, or when would that be coming up? Before we get into capital project?
So we're a little after 10 o'clock. At any point, I think when Jennifer's reviewing policy level requests for a specific set of funds, would be a good time. Like now would be a great time for a break, or after this summary would be a good time for a break before we launch into the financial plan reviews.
Let's just go ahead, since it's fresh, do a summary then.
Okay. So this is the summary of the policy level requests that I just reviewed. The number of requests, policy level requests per fund, the request for some additional staffing, others were just a reclassification. We will go through after the break. Karen will go through the 10-year financial plans, so then you can see what the 10-year financial plans look like with respective to then the policy level requests that we've made. I would say that these are, while it does seem like there's a lot of policy level requests, maybe compared to the other offices and departments that maybe have come forward, we also have to remember that these are all a part of those restricted funds, and the one policy level request we have out of the general fund is the $60,000 for that fee in lieu.
Okay.
So Jennifer, will you also be reviewing your capital project requests with the board this morning?
Yes, after this, we move right into capital.
Perfect.
Okay, then let's, I've got about, 12 after. Let's take a 13-minute break. Be back at 10:20. 10:20. We're in recess. Thank you. break. It's still October 12th, 2020, and we're going through all the public works budget requests and budget. So carry on, Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you. So we talked about the policy level requests for the different funds instead of operating budgets. And now Karen Weiss, our financial and asset manager, division manager, is going to go through some of our 10-year financial plans. Oh, and I am going to, because I'm sharing my screen, pull them up. So bear with me for just one moment as I...
We'll wait right here.
I have not had to switch, so I'm going to stop sharing and then start again.
And so while Jennifer's doing that, I would say, keep in mind, we have 23 funds. We are not going to go through every single one of them unless you would like. So if you do not see, so right now we're going to focus on the maintenance and operations funds because we just went through the operating fund request. So you can get a view of what those funds look like. We will look at the capital funds. When we go through the capital request, we wanted to try and connect the 10-year plan to the requests that we're asking for. But if you do not see a fund that if we do not present a fund and you would like to see that, for example, we are not going through all of the utility funds, please ask and we are prepared to bring that up for you. So to begin with, this is Fund 1190. I think you have hopefully in your materials the large sheets of these so you can take a look at this. It's a little bit hard to see on the screen.
I can try to blow it up a little bit, maybe.
Do you have a page number, Karen?
So the handout is a little bit in different order. So give us a minute to get to, what is the 1190, you said?
Yep, Fund 1190, Roads and Transportation.
Do you have a page number?
I do not believe it's a page number. The funds should be in fund order, I believe. Actually, Olivia, you might know because I think you put together the materials for it.
I would love to say they are, but we were assembling them right up before, so they may not be. And if you're missing it, I hope you're not. I will rush.
1190. So look for this top left.
They're all in the same order, though, so all you guys.
Is everybody not quite?
Yeah, that's fine. They're out of order, but they're there. Sorry, never mind.
Found it. Not last.
This is the 10-year plan. Just give us a second.
Sure.
Karen, did that help by making it larger?
It did for me. Is everybody, are we good?
Yep, we're there.
Okay, very good. Okay, so I'm going to keep this just very high level. So again, reminding you, Fund 1190 is our Roads and Transportation Fund. This is the fund that is experiencing the impacts of the diversion and levy shifts. So a reminder that beginning in 2020, or as of 2020, we are shifting $4.5 million in annual roads property tax revenue. $3 million of that is in levy shift, and 1.5 of that is in diversion. So looking at the long term, we keep talking about this in the long term. You can see if you look at that dark blue line, the net year activity revenue less expenses, there you can see that our expenditures are outpacing our revenue. And a good deal of that is, as you can see, the impact of that $4.5 million of levy shift and diversion. So what does that do? Well, we've been able to manage through that in this short-term period because we had a fairly healthy ending fund balance built up. But as you can see over time, as we're getting out into 2026, we're projecting that we would be at a negative fund balance, which obviously we can't. So, absent either a change in our programs or level of service for our roads maintenance, or a reduction in that diversion and levy shift amount, or coming up with additional revenue to meet our road maintenance needs, we will need to be looking at these options, or how to manage through what our projection is going to be in the long term in the road fund. So one other note here, I will note it in the expenditures under payment preservation, chip seal and overlay. You can see we have carried forward money from 2020 and sort of ramped up that program for 2021. You'll hear a little bit about that in the capital program side of it, but I just wanted to point that out. And up above, we also have a REIT funding request to help address some of those payment preservation needs. So again, that's in the high level. I will say that, obviously we do have some policy level requests for the roads fund, but the amount of those policy level requests are not the factor that's causing this fund to be looking in the long term into a deficit position. So with that, you can ask questions. Maybe in the meantime, Jennifer and or commissioners, if you can find the Parks and Trails Fund, which is Fund 1330, that will be the one we go through next.
It was right underneath on mine. Yep.
Okay, well, that's a win for us. So this was done. What's that, Robin?
Would the board like to have a conversation about the road fund?
I have a question about what Karen just mentioned, if I could do that.
On the road fund?
Yeah. Well, on the pavement preservation thing, this would be the county manager. Didn't you mention something about this as a proposal last week or something?
Yeah, I suggested the board to consider an investment from REIT 2 to an overlay program. Yeah, you're
Okay. I just wondered if we're talking about the same thing.
Yep.
That is the same thing, but you may note, if you look in the 2021 column, that the amount coming from REIT is proposed to be $700,000, but the chip seal and overlay program is proposed to spend $6 million. So REIT is only making up a small part of that.
So you might want to set this one aside too, because again, that discussion and that proposal is a part of our capital project request. It just happens to be in Fund 1190. So it might be a good idea to just set this particular 10-year financial aside for that discussion as well. I just wanted to point it out as we went through that.
Commissioner Menser, you had your hand up.
Well, I wasn't going to bring it up today because we brought it up last week, but I mean, with the public works folks here, I don't know if they were listening to our discussions last week. I suggested that I wasn't comfortable continuing to do the shifts that we've been doing, and it was proposed, I think, by you or Ramiro to start a process of reducing that shift with a very modest amount, obviously this year, but try to get that mindset and that process started. And until I'm convinced otherwise, I'm going to be supportive of that approach. Again, those discussions will come later after we've heard all the different requests and kind of start to crunch the numbers. But if Jennifer and her team didn't hear that discussion last week, I would like them to be aware of that discussion.
Yeah, that's correct, Commissioner Menser. The framework in which the board approved, the general fund includes a step down, is $250,000 in 2021 and $250,000 the year after that. So you're correct on that.
Thanks for bringing that up. Okay. Okay, any other questions on the road fund? Okay. Parks and Trails.
Okay, Fund 1330. So this was a brand new fund that was initiated in 2020. It was funded with $500,000 of the levy shift from the road fund. So this includes both our maintenance and operations budget and our capital project budget. So under the expenditures, the very last line there is the Parks and Trails capital projects. So you can see for 2021, and again, you'll hear about those in a little bit, but we have a $1.8 million program there. And reminder that those are funded exclusively through Parks impact fees and REAP 2 funding. Those are the funding sources that we have for that. So our total project expenditure budget is $2,721,000 for 2021. Plus, we do have $115,000 of direct appropriation to the general fund. This is the first year we are doing that direct appropriation to the general fund. So our total program then is $2.8 million for 2021. So I guess what I would say here is, again, looking at that dark blue net year activity revenue less expenditures. Right now, you can see that our $500,000 levy shift amount that is going towards Parks and Trails through then a general fund appropriation is enough to fund our current expenditure levels. But when you look out over time, over into 2026, you can see we're starting to, with cost of living, types of activities, increases, projected increases in supplies, et cetera, services, you can see that again, we are going to need to have some sort of a growth factor for revenue in the Parks and Trails Fund. So while this will solve our short-term need for the next, 5-year period of time, 3 to 5 year period of time, these are as we go out, the projections are just projections. We will need to have discussions coming in the future as to how we will continue to maintain the Parks and Trails. And keeping in mind, we still can have discussions about even a current level of service.
Karen, I understand what you're saying in terms of we see the line net year activity revenue less expenditures in 2026 at $7,878. How does that relate to the end of fund balance, which seems to increase from 2025 to 2026?
Yes, because right now those are going into and increasing the ending fund balance. But as soon as our expenditures are outpacing our revenue, we will be spending down that ending fund balance over time.
But I understand that, but that should be taken into consideration at some point, because what is the purpose of having an ending fund balance?
Correct, but we also need to make sure we have enough adequate ending fund balance to meet our cash flow needs.
So I guess that was my point. What is the minimum ending fund balance to meet your cash flow?
Well, it's very dependent. You can see there it varies based on capital projects. So in a year where we have more capital projects, all of our capital projects are reimbursement basis, meaning we have to front the money before we get reimbursed by either REAP or Parks impact fees. So it is important, and we have struggled this year. We have been in a negative fund balance situation throughout this year because we are spending money prior to being reimbursed for that. The same is true for conservation features, which funds our maintenance and operations on our 3 trails and 2 of our parks. So yes, thank you, Romero. Our ending fund balance based on our needs is actually, we are having challenges trying to keep it in a positive position.
So I would recommend, and you see it on this page, a 2-month fund balance calculated in 2021 would be a little under $500,000. And this fund, because it operates 100% on a reimbursement basis, really should have a little more than that. So I would recommend a fund balance that we need to grow to over time more in the $750,000 range. It's going to be difficult even getting, though, to the $500,000. So, when you ask how much, I would say at least $500,000.
Is that based on a percentage?
That's based on 2 months. And then again, this is 100% reimbursement. If you look at your monthly cash balance reports, as Karen said, we've been in a negative fund balance this year for most of the year. And she and I have been talking about ways to turn that around. One of the things we did was advance the transfer of general fund rather than do it on a reimbursement to get money into this fund. But we're going to have to continue to take some reasonable steps to ensure that they keep a positive cash flow. And that's going to be hard when their fund balance is not enough at this point in time.
Thank you. And the fact that we do have capital projects a part of this makes it a little bit more difficult than even if it was just an M&O fund. There's only M&O, those expenditures are fairly predictable and level generally over time. Those capital projects can swing a large amount in a short period of time. If we have a large project with a large construction cost that might be incurred in a 1 or 2 month period of time, that can be a significant financial outlay in a short period.
Okay. Any more on that, on Rhodes? Or parks, rather? Okay, go ahead, Karen.
Okay. The next series or set of 10-year plans is for noxious weeds and lakes, and that's going to be Fund 1350, 1720, and then 1740.
Yeah.
Are we all there?
I am.
Okay, so this should be fairly quick. Again, at this point, this fund is healthy for the position for 2021. The thing to keep an eye on here is that right now this is currently showing assessments being flat. If you'll notice that top line of operating assessments moving out, it's shown to be flat. Beginning in about 2023, if you look at the ending fund balance, we're projecting of about $157,000 there. Again, to Robin's point, what's our cash flow needs? And we have an estimate of about 170. You can see we start to get into that position of needing to look at rates and what those assessment rates will be. So just the key points here, the key message is that we would be having discussions and looking at what those operating assessment rates may be in the next 2 to 3 year period of time.
Karen, I excuse me. I would add that I believe that Tim Wilson has just began talking with the Noxious Weed Board about that. They're just beginning discussions on that.
Okay, so if there are any additional questions or comments on that, if not, we'll switch to Fund 1720, which is the Long Lake Management District. So this, I think, is a success story in the collaboration with the Lake Management District. You can see through the expenditure levels and the specific line items there that we've really worked hard, so for example, salaries and wages, to get the right people doing the work, to align the program and the services. We've looked for economies of scale between the Lake Management Districts, which includes Lake Lawrence, and the Noxious Weeds Fund. And so we've really worked hard to listen and address those expenditures. And what you can see now is that the majority of the expenditures is in professional services. So that's that delivery of the services. That's 62% of the budgeted expenditures there. And we've also then worked with them, and you can see the reserve for future treatment set aside down there at the bottom. So we have an ending fund balance projected to be about $480,000 at the end of 2021. But of that, we are continually, and these are based on Lake Management District recommendations, increasing the amount that's set aside for future reserve treatments, because there are years where those treatments are more expensive and more extensive than the ongoing annual amounts. So any questions on that. I guess I would just remind you that there is a proposal for a 3% assessment increase for 2021, and also the $34 per parcel increase in this fund.
I believe
Did you have something? Go ahead, Romero.
I believe the $34 assessment per parcel was already approved by the board. And the only left, I think, is a 3%, which is a regular cost of living increase. Is that correct? I believe the board already had a public hearing on the $34. It has been
I believe they had the public hearing. My understanding is that would actually be approved as a part of the
As
budget
part of the budget?
process.
Okay,
I see Robin nodding her head. Okay.
okay. So because that's reflected on the operating assessment. In 2020 was at 187.
Correct.
It was up to 236,000, right? Okay.
Correct.
And while the board held the specific public hearing, it will also be mentioned in the public hearing on revenue that supports the budget that the board is required to have in November.
Okay.
Okay, so again, a quick look at Fund 1740. This is the same story now, reminding that a 1% increase is budgeted or proposed for 21 and 22. In this particular financial plan, in 23 and 26 out, I have used a 3% inflation or increase factor. Those will all be evaluated on a year-to-year basis and discussed with the Lake Management District. But for purposes of this financial plan, that was what was used. But same story here in terms of those collaboration with the Lake Management Districts, the alignment of the program, and the professional services emphasis on the delivery of services. And again, the reserve for future treatments set aside for future years for those years in which a more extensive treatment is needed. So, okay, so if no additional questions there, we're going to switch to the solid waste fund, and we're going to look at funds 4030 and 4040, which is the post-closure reserve. So I'll give you all a minute to find those.
4040 and 4050?
4030 and 4040.
40, okay, well, I've got 40, 40, and 50. Let me find 30.
That's just about 3 pages behind that page.
Okay, we're
Yeah, unless you've got
4040 and we're looking for 4030, right?
Just behind that. I believe
Not in mine.
it's 4040 and 4050 or 4030. I can remember.
4030 and then 4040. 4050 is our reserve. So that is the capital aspects of the program.
I've got 4040, but I can't find 4030.
Same here.
Yeah, I've got 40 and 50.
I can look for it and send it to the printers and come pass it out.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Karen, while Olivia is doing that, shall we move into stormwater and then we'll
Yep.
come back? Okay.
That sounds like a good idea. Okay. So switch gears. Look for Fund 4060, our stormwater utility.
Yay.
It was just at the
I
beginning.
got 40.
Aren't you glad we're not going through every single 10-year plan?
Yes, thank you.
It just feels like. Okay, so this is our stormwater utility maintenance and operations budget. This is a good look because this is a shared responsibility of both CPED and Public Works Department. So in 2019, the board took action to move some of the stormwater programs into public works. And so the technical operations and the operations and maintenance moved into public works, and the CPED department retained the compliance and monitoring aspects and the education and outreach team. But that education and outreach team obviously also provides support to the public works programs. So again, public works is the fund manager for this, but you can see the two different programs or two different department responsibilities outlined here. And this is, unlike our roads and our parks, this fund is in a pretty healthy position. Our utility assessments are currently meeting the maintenance and operations needs, as well as setting aside money for future capital expenditures. So this fund is currently healthy and no concerns here. Any questions on that?
Nope. Doesn't look like it. Nope, doesn't sound like it.
Okay, so has our 4030 showed up yet? Or are we still waiting for that?
Still waiting.
Okay, so with that, then we can move into the water and sewer utilities. So this is again, we have 6 maintenance and operations utilities funds. We are not going to show you all 6 of them unless you would like to see all of 6 of them.
What number?
We are going to show you Fund 4410, and then we will also show you Grand Mound maintenance and operation, and those numbers are 4340 and 4350.
Let's start with 44. Let's say 10.
4410, Olympic View Sewer.
Olympic View. Got it.
Is everybody there?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things we want to show you here is when we talk about our utilities, we wanted to show you the large difference in the size of the utilities that we have. This is all good information as we think about our conversations about efficiencies and the needs of the various utilities and planning for infrastructure and the potential consolidation discussion. So this is our smallest utility. There are about 28 customers in Olympic View. This is a sewer operation only. And so as you can see, and I should also mention there is no opportunity for growth in this particular utility. So we have about $40,000, just under $40,000 in revenue. Our expenditures for 2021 are proposed to be about $66,000. This is both for this fund only, maintenance and operations and capital. One of the challenges when you have a small utility is you might say, well, why is the budget so expensive there? Well, you have to have money built into your budget to be able to respond to emergency or emerging needs. So while we don't necessarily anticipate spending the full $66,000 in 2021, we are including that in our budget so that we are able to respond and meet the needs of the Olympic View utility. So I have programmed in there some anticipated expenditure savings. I've been conservative in that. Nonetheless, you can see over the long term, we have a negative ending fund balance. Getting down into about 2023, we would not have adequate ending fund balance to support the ongoing maintenance and infrastructure needs of this particular utility. So we will need to be doing some planning for this, whether that's through rates, consolidation, loans and grants potentially if we had outgoing infrastructure needs. But the real issue here is the maintenance and operations cost of the utility. So this is one end of the spectrum for you to look at.
How many customers were there again?
28.
28.
Okay. And then we'll switch to Grand Mound Fund 4350. I'm sorry, 4340. Got ahead of myself there. Okay. So this is the other end of the spectrum.
Which one? I'm sorry. Which one?
Yep, 4340, Grand Mound Sewer Utility.
43. 4440 maybe.
4350, 4340, Grand Mound.
4340 and 4350. 4340 is first.
Mm-hmm.
Grand Mound Sewer Utility
Yep,
Reserve?
Grand Mound Sewer Utility, and then we'll do the Grand Mound Water Utility. Okay. So these are the maintenance.
Okay, mine says 4440 and 4450.
4340.
So you've got
You
the
should tell it
reserves.
4340.
Please stand by.
Not that. It says Grand Mound.
Unplug him and reboot him.
Did I mention we have a lot of funds?
Are you sure it's not misnumbered?
No, it's 4340.
Okay. I just don't see it.
Yeah,
It's here somewhere.
yeah, let me give you a copy. Hold on.
Are we all there?
I got it.
Okay, very good. So this is to just show you the other end of the spectrum. So the Grand Mound utility, water and sewer utility is our largest utility and services about 400 customers in the Grand Mound area, including commercial. This particular utility has the most potential for growth. And so again, I guess I also didn't mention in 2021, we did not propose any rate increases. So these are the same rates that we are currently in 2020 charging to the ratepayers. We, two reasons. A, we thought that in this COVID environment that holding rates steady and constant for our ratepayers was a smart way to approach things. This is, as you know, you have provided support for the utility customers who are having difficulty paying their bills through the Utility Assistance Fund that you've provided CARES funding to the Community Action Council. But we also have the cost of services study that we are proposing. Because of the varying needs of our utilities, the fact that we need to plan for long-term infrastructure, and the fact that each of these utilities has a little bit different, is in a little bit different place in their infrastructure life cycle, we wanted to, in 2021, have a utility cost of services study so we can look and evaluate the rates for each of our utilities. So this particular utility is in fairly good shape, as you can see from our ending fund balance. But what we do here is we take the revenue that exceeds our maintenance and operations expenditures, budgeted expenditures, and we transfer those funds to reserves. So the fourth line down under expenditures is the line that shows the money that we are taking and setting aside into the reserve. So that's the amount that right now, based on budget, our revenue rates are exceeding our expenditure needs. And this then is taken into consideration with what our cash flow needs are. And so we retain the 2 to 3 month ending fund balance to make sure we have enough funding to support our utility M&O needs. So any questions with that? When we look at Fund 4350, that's just the water side of the equation, and same message there. This is we are transferring funds to reserves and maintaining our ending fund balance. When you see the capital funds, the capital reserve fund 10-year plans, which we'll present as a capital part of our discussion, you'll see how those capital fund balances are looking. And I can say as a general statement, we will need to be planning for future infrastructure costs. Okay. So question, do we have 4340 in front of us yet?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay. So just really quickly, I'll come back to the solid waste fund 4030. Did I say 4340? I said.
You did. So Karen, are you wanting 40, 34030.
Sorry, 4030 solid waste. My
Okay,
apologies.
I need the number. What's the number again?
4030.
4030.
As if it's not confusing enough, I will confuse you further. Okay. So this is our solid waste maintenance and operations fund. So this, the large or significant part of this fund, you can see funds are contractual operations for the work and the drop boxes. So, it's a $26 million in revenue program. And that revenue is brought in to take care of the solid waste handling and management needs in Thurston County. And that includes not just the disposal and transport of that solid waste, but also the education and outreach programs associated with it that are required by the solid waste management plan. We do support environmental health for their education and enforcement activities. Jennifer's hovering over that. That's about a $700,000 expenditure in the fund. And then we, right below that, you can see the operating transfers to the solid waste reserve funds. We do set aside money to pay for those future current and future infrastructure needs. Our infrastructure is aging, so we do set aside that money, and that money goes into Fund 4050 and also into Fund 4040, our post-closure reserve, to fund both the ongoing maintenance and operations and capital project needs there. So again, over time, then you can see our ending fund balance, very healthy at this point. But over time, and I will tell you, I used very conservative projections in future years. It is very difficult knowing that we are going to have a new contract for operations beginning in 2023. It's very difficult to make any kind of projections at this point. We will have clarity, obviously, around some of that as we go forward into future years. So I've, again, used pretty conservative increases over the next few years for purposes of this. But what you can see is our ending fund balance is being drawn down. Much of that is anticipated and deliberate, and that is to fund those construction costs for that infrastructure. And you can see in particular in 2024 and 2025, there are some large transfers planned to go into the reserve for some capital projects that are currently programmed in during that time for the work facilities and scale houses. So there's no questions on that. We can look at
I do have a question, Karen. Looking at the very bottom at the assumptions, on the right-hand side of that, it shows 2021 policy level request expenditure impacts. And these are assumptions that the WS2 extension request gets approved.
So these are embedded in these 10-year plans are the policy level requests. And so I've shown you what those are. So included in that non-capital project number is that WSU extension request. I wanted you to know that these are built with those expenditures, those policy levels included in them.
Okay. Just want to be sure I was reading it right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then last 4040 before we move to capital. So this is our post-closure reserve. This is just a reminder for all of us that we do have a 30-year obligation and possibly beyond to monitor and maintain our post-closure reserve, which was closed in 2000. So this is the fund that provides for those ongoing compliance and monitoring and maintenance activities and any construction associated with that. So again, over time, we've set aside this fund is doing exactly what we would expect it to do, which is over time be spending down funds set aside for these responsibilities and moving over the life cycle of that reserve. But the bottom line is these responsibilities will be paid for with solid waste funds. there, right? I mean, the bottom line is we need to make sure we have sustainable revenue sources into our solid waste fund to maintain the post-closure reserve responsibilities as well.
So this fund, just FYI, is required by state law. There's a formula that we need to follow to ensure that there are sufficient funds. And we are just required to maintain this fund so that we can meet our requirements for post-closure over time. So this is a legally required fund.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Robin. With some sophisticated systems embedded in it, gas monitoring. Well, we are talking about we've got a flare capital project that will be worked on in 2021 and into 2022 for the gas system at the work. So, okay, so that is it for the maintenance and operation. Again, I didn't go through all the utility ones. If you want to see them at a different point, we probably can. I'm looking at the time, seeing we have a half hour for a capital program. So
Thank you. I was going to point that out about the time. Just make sure you have sufficient time. Because we go to, is it 11:45?
11:30.
11:30.
11:30? Okay. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Where are we going now?
Okay. So I will go back to the PowerPoint presentation.
And this only has 12 pages.
Okay. So we are moving into the capital portion of our budget. And so all of the policy level requests moving forward are for our capital improvement programs. We did, as a reminder, brief the board on July 29th regarding the planned projects for 21 and 22, because at that time we were anticipating a biennial budget. The projects have also been submitted to the Planning Commission, and we had a briefing with them on September 16th. The projects highlighted in blue or gray, if you don't have a color copy, are all of those projects that we are requesting funding expenditure authority for in 2021. And some of the projects we're asking for full project amount, and others the project has been approved through our project-based budgeting approach, and so we're asking for additional funding. As I go through these, I have my division manager lifelines on this virtual meeting because it is a lot of information, and so I definitely rely on them to be able to provide the more detail on the projects and the policy level requests. So with that, this is for our Parks and Trails capital projects. And we are requesting $50,000 additional expenditure for our acquisition program. And really what this does is just allow us the flexibility should something come up that we want to take a look at. And we're able to leverage our conservation futures funding. So it's more of a program policy level request.
Is it just a placeholder?
It is. Yes. The second item is for improvements and development program. And so this is an item that, again, allows us some flexibility. So if there is some unforeseen issue that comes up, we would be able to address it with this. We also have our Kennydale Park restroom replacement. And again, we reviewed those projects in the July 29th briefing. As Karen mentioned earlier, our funding sources for our capital projects are basically REIT and park impact fees. So you will see the percentages here where the dollar amount that we have in revenue, 65% of that is coming from impact fees and 35% is a request from REIT 2. Our Burfoot Park replacement project. This is a 40-year-old structure that we are replacing, and we did go through details of what the project was. The Chehalis Western Trail, 41st Avenue Northeast Trailhead. And again, you can see the requests here. 75% of this project will be impact fees, coming from impact fees, and 25% from REIT. We have and let me know if I'm going too fast or you want me to go faster and just do a highlight summary.
So far, it's a good pace for me. You, Ty, and Gary, good pace?
Good.
Okay, good. Thank you.
The Deschutes Falls Parkway, Park Walkway and Viewpoint improvements that we're anticipating. I think we're doing the planning right now on that project. But again, 65% impact fees, 35% REIT 2. And then on our Chehalis Western Trail, BNSF Bridge Talcott Crossing, we were actually able to find an alternative to a solution to the road crossing. So we are actually reducing this amount by $100,000 on this project. So those are the policy level requests for capital projects for parks. Moving into transportation, and there's quite a bit more. Again, all of the projects that are highlighted in blue are either projects that are new or we're asking for additional funding on. 6 of these projects do have grants associated with them. So we have been successful in leveraging our road fund to secure $7.6 million in grants. We have the Marvin Road Upgrade Phase 1. This is 22nd Avenue to Pacific Avenue. And we do have a significant amount of money coming from grants and then also from concurrency. Our Yelm Highway and Pacific Avenue pedestrian improvements, which has been in front of the board. I'm going to highlight just a couple of these. So we do have our fish enhancement program. And so this is a program that is funded from REIT. We have been requesting and getting $2 million annually for this program. And we are moving out into the future requesting $1 million. As this is becoming more programmatic, it's allowing us the opportunity to be able to build up some of those funds in the program and be able to address some of our more complicated culvert replacements. I want to move forward to for example, on our highway safety improvement program, we're anticipating a $2.87 million grant for this work. And so this is the requesting the revenue expenditure authority for that project. We also will this year be finalizing our ADA transition plan. And so this is policy request B34111, where we are now shifting into an implementation of that plan, we'll be able to make improvements to meet the current ADA requirements on our existing infrastructure. So for any of our new projects that we're planning, those improvements are already, we're designing and building them in. This, as we finalize our ADA transition plan, this is a program that we're requesting to establish and start funding to make improvements to existing infrastructure. Certainly the dollar amount that exists for all of those improvements is extremely high, and it will take us many, many years. But this is certainly the step in the right direction to get moving on those. The other item I wanted to highlight, and this is what was spoke of earlier, and this is our road preservation program. This is the first time that we're actually asking for REIT 2 money. And so as we look at our preservation program for our transportation system, we know that it costs more to do complete rebuild of our roads than it does to do ongoing preservation and maybe do a thin lift overlay or an overlay. And so we really need to be, and you'll see in our 10-year plan where we're allocating more money for this preservation program, because in the long run, in terms of the total life cycle cost, we will decrease that total life cycle cost if we're doing regular preservation as opposed to waiting to have to do complete rebuilds of those roads. And so we were moving forward with a $700,000 request from REIT.
Just as a point of clarification, is that point that the county manager talked to us about before?
Yes.
Yeah, last week, yeah.
Okay.
So I am going to now share the 3010 financial plan. Okay. And Karen, you are up.
So for 2020, so I guess big picture here, again, the impacts of the road fund can also be felt in our construction in progress. So this is just the fund where we fund the capital projects. So again, over time, you're seeing that ending fund balance decrease. But, the good news, the hard work of our staff here, you can see that we do bring a lot of funding sources to supplement the road fund for the execution of those projects. So of our $16 million budget for 2021 in terms of expenditures, 81% of the revenue is not from the road fund, if that makes sense. So we have grants that are about 47% of that, but we're also using transportation impact fees, the REIT funding that we've already talked about, and some of the other revenue coming from other sources that can be concurrency. In this case, I think it's from the Department of Transportation for specific projects. So the Rhodes and Transportation group does a fantastic job of leveraging our road fund for those additional revenue sources to support the program. Nonetheless, big picture, over time, we need to be looking at our road fund to make sure that we have enough revenue to support both the maintenance, operations, and preservation side of it, as well as the construction side of things.
So I have a question on that, if I may.
Go ahead.
So on the grants that you have, 2023, 13, $5 million, are those grants that have already been awarded? Or this is just a hopeful outlook?
I believe it's a combination of both. I would have to go back and drill into the specifics. And Scott, you may know off the top of your head, but I know for sure there's a couple grants in there that we have not secured for projects that are beginning in 22 or 23 or later. But some of those are grants that have been secured for projects that we are currently working on, but we've just programmed out the work over the next few years.
Because I was under the impression the program had to be financially constrained.
Yes, that is correct.
What is correct?
And the 6-year program has to be financially constrained, yes.
So if we have an assumption of presumed grants, is that financially constrained?
If we are, one of the projects in here, for example, on the Marvin Road, if we are not successful in getting the grants, we will be reducing the project accordingly. So absent the grant, the scope will be dramatically changed.
Know that in the capital facilities plan or the CIP, that if you identify grants as a method of payment in the 6-year plan, you must identify the grant and why you're relatively sure that that'll be awarded. So if there's an assumption that we have grants that are part of the CFP, we need to know where they're coming from.
I do know that all of the grants that are in the CIP, Robin, are identified by source.
Yep.
Any other questions on this, or are we good to move forward?
I'll move on.
For solid waste, we have one new project.
4030?
This is for,
Is this on 4030?
The fund would be 4050.
4050?
because it's capital.
4050. This would be the reserve fund 4050.
Okay, got it.
So the first request, this is has to do with how we've been budgeting, and so we talked a little bit about that before, that we were moving from our capital projects being funded out of the reserve as opposed to M&O. The second request here is actually releasing money. So this was work that we originally had planned on the closed landfill. There was a landfill cover that we actually did not need to do. And then we've had some other projects that we have scheduled out into the later years. So this is making that adjustment. And then the last item is this program allows us to respond to emergency facility and infrastructure needs at the work and drop box location. For example, our trailer that we have at the Waste and Recovery Center, we found mold in it. And so this is a trailer that we have staff working in. And so we are looking to get a new trailer for them to be able to work out of, and we've been working with our capital project manager on that effort. For storm and surface water utility, again, all of the projects highlighted in blue are either new projects or we're requesting additional funding.
What number are you going to?
This would be for Fund 4070.
Okay.
So these are projects, I'm actually, for the the sake of time, we have 10 minutes left. These are projects that we did review with the board during the CIP presentation. But as we go through this, if there's follow-up information that's needed, we would be happy to provide that. What I'd like to do is shift right into the 10-year financial plan. That's not it. Here we go. So this is the 10-year financial plan, 4070 for the stormwater reserve.
Just very high level here, there is a component of the assessment for stormwater that is specifically for capital projects, and that gets transferred over into this reserve on an annual basis. And high level big picture here is that, not unlike the maintenance and operations fund, there is currently adequate funding to support those identified capital projects in the CIP at this point, this time.
We're now into our water and sewer utilities. So again, all of the projects or programs that are highlighted in blue or gray on your sheet are projects and expenditures that we're asking for in 2021. They're either new projects or adding additional expenditure authority. For the most part, most of them are funding for programs to address projects that improvements that may need to happen because of the aging infrastructure. So the first item, policy level request 34076. Is requesting expenditure authority for a upgrading of our SCADA system, which is the supervisory control and data acquisition system. So this is evaluating the upgrades of that. It is. I'm going to ask Tim to step in and help me. This is to upgrade our existing system, correct?
Yes, that's correct. These are upgrades across the utilities, and yeah, you're exactly right. Our SCADA system is basically how the different components of the systems talk to each other.
Thank you, Tim. The Boston Harbor wastewater treatment plant generator replacement is funding. This is requesting, we're actually requesting REAP money here, $350,000 for this project. I am going to skip through and highlight where we're requesting REAP money. We're also requesting REAP money for the Tamashan water treatment unit process assessment in the amount of $180,000. And you'll notice that for this is our utilities are where we're requesting a lot of REAP money for improvements to our infrastructure.
I have a question about that.
Yes.
When you do get REAP money to do things like upgrades like that, then is it after those upgrades take place, then it's self-sufficient on those individual plants after that? They take care of themselves? I mean, you're using a different fund to build them up, then do the rates take care of it after that?
It certainly moves into maintenance and operations, but as Karen identified, the one utility that we have that's growing is Grand Mound, but the remainder of them is just the ongoing maintenance and operations of the infrastructure that we have. So as components of those systems fail and require updating, we are doing that, and then the cost of just maintaining those continues out of our maintenance and operations fund. So I will also give this opportunity to Karen and or Tim if there's additional information that can be added to that.
That's absolutely right. I would say the other factor that we struggle with is that, as we demonstrated earlier, some of our utilities are very small and we don't have very many ratepayers to be able to spread costs over, whereas some of them have growth potential. The only one really that has growth potential at this point is Grand Mound. Boston Harbor has some very limited growth potential. So those ongoing maintenance and operations costs are difficult. Even after we invest in the infrastructure to maintain those rates at rates that are affordable. Our rates are higher, can be higher, not all of them, but can be higher than those utilities where there are, a broader base of customers, some economies of scale in that. Tamashan, for example, has our highest rate, and it's in excess of 200 and I'm looking at my cheat sheet here, but it's $250 a month, which is a fairly hefty rate for those ratepayers. So we struggle because of the size of some of these utilities to pay for those ongoing maintenance and operations cost at an affordable rate.
I know it was mentioned that we might have some Boston Harbor utility customers that are watching this. And so I think what we'll do, Karen, is maybe go through the 10-year financial, the 4010. So this is for Boston Harbor. So let me pull this up. It's 4210.
Okay, so what Jennifer is bringing up here is our Boston Harbor Utility Reserve. This is for both water and sewer. And the first line under the revenue will show you that we are transferring money from the M&O fund to the extent that the rates provide adequate funding or more than the M&O budget to transfer to the reserves. But you can see that that's not always a very large number. The M&O costs take the bulk of the rate funding. And so in 2021, based on our expenditure needs and on some specific projects, you can see that absent the $350,000 request for REIT 2, so there's the REIT 2 line and it shows $351,950. There's some money that's already been approved for an asset management program in there, but the additional $350,000, absent that fund, this particular fund would be in a negative fund balance at the end of 2021. So if we were to subtract that $350 in refunding, we would have about $150,000 negative fund balance. So again, the rates for these utilities not supporting the aging infrastructure needs and their ongoing M&O costs, and that is difficult because of the limitations of the size that we have in these utilities. Continuing on out, you can see the projections for 23 through 26. We will definitely be needing to look at our infrastructure needs, looking at revenue sources to support them. That's part of the justification or rationale for a rate study, figuring out what the best configuration and rate structure for these utilities is to support those ongoing needs. You're going to see this. I'm going to sound like a broken record. You're going to see the same discussions as we go through the other financial plans. The next one we're going to look at is 4420, which is the Tamashan utility. Yes.
I don't know. We have a minute left.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
Well, then you don't have to listen to my broken record. Every single one of these utilities is in the same boat, whether it's in 2021 or 23 and beyond. The infrastructure is something we are going to need to address.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, any questions of Jennifer, Karen, Robin, Scott, anybody?
No, they're covering her pretty good.
Yeah, nothing, Ty? All right, do you have any final wrap-up words, Robin?
Just to thank Jennifer and the Public Works team for coming and spending this morning reviewing all the wonderful things that you do for the county. And then to say that this afternoon, we'll start again at 1:30 with the community planning and economic development.
And yeah, this was a Cliff Notes version of Public Works.
Really was.
And after CPED is the tourism promotion area.
Right. Shauna Stewart will join us this afternoon.
Yay.
I would like to add
please.
just a thank you to the commissioners for your time. I certainly hope, I'm glad that we had Monday morning and it was fresh and not the end of the week. And I hope that this set a positive tone for how you're moving forward for the rest of the week. But I do very much appreciate your time.
It's not only not a problem, but it's a pleasure because this just shows how vastly vital Public Works is in everything that you do. So thank you all very much at Public Works. All right, we're in recess. No, we're adjourned until 1:30.
Good job. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.